Every time you buy an app on an iPhone, you give Apple a 30% tax on every single purchase. That sounds pretty bad, and it gets worse. Apps are not allowed to tell you to go sign up on an external website. So think about Spotify, for example. People are already complaining about how little artists are getting paid by Spotify. So adding on an extra 30% would be unreasonable. But if you're not allowed to advertise that you can sign up online, then that puts Spotify in a quite difficult position. When Fortnite, for a time the most popular game in the world, tried to use their own payment system on the App Store, it got booted off by Apple, which led to a court case that in 2021 ruled that Apple had to allow other payment processors. Apple argues that that would make it harder for users to manage their purchases, undermine user privacy protections, and put users at risk of fraud, which is not completely unfounded, but that was 4 years ago. Why are we talking about this now? Well, I'll let the judge speak for herself. Apple's continued attempts to interfere with competition will not be tolerated. The way that Apple implemented the judge's ruling was that they decided to charge a 27% platform fee instead of the App Store fee, then lied to the judge about how they came up with that number. And on top of that, when someone tried to use that third-party payment system, Apple used language designed to scare users off. And as the judge so briefly puts it, again, Apple chose the most anti-competitive option. Apple's justifications for these requirements strain credulity. Remarkably, Apple believed that this court would not see through its obvious cover-up. A nice one as well. Tim Cook chose poorly, and the best. Effective immediately, Apple will no longer impede developers' ability to communicate with users, nor will they levy or impose a new commission on off-app purchases. That's a pretty scathing comment from a judge who's clearly done with Apple's behavior. So Fortnite might come back to the US App Store, and Patreon might be able to charge lower prices for its creators. But this is Tech Asia, so why does a US ruling matter over here? Epic's court cases with Apple and Google were the first domino to fall back in 2021. Shaped by that ruling in the US, the EU implemented the Digital Markets Act that would require Apple to allow access to alternative app stores in the EU. And though it wasn't directly linked to the Epic trial, South Korea and Japan both have legislations in place that force Apple to allow apps to create links to their websites or allow third-party payments. Governments around Asia have been eyeing Apple and Google's unfair behaviors in their app stores. Even a small amount of competitive pressure from the EU has led to Apple making changes to its global app store. Apple plans to fight this ruling, but if it fails, countries across Asia, from South Korea, Japan, to China or Indonesia, could force Apple to also lower its fees, using the US as a counter to Apple's arguments and as an example that it's, safe to do. Out of the $100 billion spent every year on the App Store, that means that Apple stands to lose $30 billion of basically free money if developers turn to third-party alternatives. So who stands to win? First of all, us. Services like Delta, Amazon, Spotify have already jumped on the bandwagon of offering in-app purchases or signups that were cheaper than what they could do before. Even if you use an Android phone, if platforms and creators get more money, that could lead to lower prices or more money to creators, at least. There's also the question of game studios. Since a lot of game studios are based in Asia, developers like Tencent, NetEase, MiHoYo, Netmarble, Bandai Namco, Garena, and the thousands of developers all across Asia, they stand to gain billions of dollars. Lower fees could help smaller studios get off the ground and, hopefully, invest in better working conditions for their artists, though that does sound like wishful thinking. As my mom always told me, life's not all about games. For a while, it was impossible to sign up for a Netflix account on the App Store. This has changed because Netflix has made custom deals with Apple to allow for, a smaller cut. But companies like Netflix, Spotify, Google have the leverage to get Apple to negotiate with them, whereas smaller players, for example Asian streamers like Viu or Nico Nico, or even the Bangladeshi Hoichoi, who I interviewed back in 2022, don't have that kind of leverage. Removing the Apple tax in countries around Asia would allow for stronger competition. When companies no longer depend on Apple's approval and then, buddy-buddy, it fosters competition amongst payment processors and streaming services. So my fingers are crossed that regulators around Asia and the rest of the world follow suit to remove Apple's anti-competitive tax on its App Store. And hey, Google is a little bit better, but not much better. That could also be a way to get Google to compete as well. By the way, I didn't waste all of this paper. Most of it is blank. I just printed the pages I need. Till next time, I guess you'll have to take care.